typically the first thing I do is update the stats. I don't even bother looking at the query. If it used to run good and it's not running well now, update stats, first step. If still getting complaints, you may need to look for other types of solution. This gives you the ability to find out, is it real? Is it a real performance problem, or is it a perceived performance problem? From my perspective, blocking is a perceived performance problem. The computer's not running slow. Something's just getting in its way. And that's not something that a query plan is going to fix. That's something we have to identify based on what's out there being run. In all these cases, base numbers can be misleading. So queries that are rerun frequently but quickly may not be causing a bottleneck, or may be sucking up a lot of CPU. You don't know until you run the numbers. If the base query runs fine, the problem is probably not a problem. However, you may end up with a problem with something like async I/O completion. You may end up with a parallelism issue. It may be that you have run into those situations where parallelism is causing a lot of extra CPU, because rather than just simply scanning an index, it's using 4 index scans, an additional sort, and then subsequently retrieving the data. Tuning other people's stored products can also be another focus of performance angst. I like that phrase. It can be aggravating. And the idea here is that one of the things that Ignite does, a performance tool does, if you have somebody else's 5,000-line product that you're trying to tune, rather than look at 5,000 lines of code, this shows you the specific line of code within the product that's causing the problem. This picture is a little on the blurry side, but what we're identifying here is that each of these bars represents a query, and we may have 3 of those within the same product, 3 separate queries within the product. Colors that you're looking at, the purple, the green, the blue, I can't read it on the right. Obviously, it changes depending on what's going on. I'm getting an error, so if one of the other presenters is not on mute, please put your phone on mute or your computer on mute. The purple might be I/O, the green might be dev, the blue might be network. We simply don't know which is which. Resolution 2, resolving locking issues. ASC locking can be confusing. However, with weight type analysis, figuring out what the locks are, how they're acquired, when they're being acquired, what the locking type is, gets really interesting. It tells you whether you're acquiring page locks, row locks, tape locks. Another control problem of this is the extension of the blocking chain. And one of the other things that gets picked up by the tool is the entire chain. So A was being blocked by B, was being blocked by C, was being blocked by D. A held it for 15 seconds, B for 12 seconds, C for 3 seconds, leaving D with that wait time, wait for each of those successive blocks to be released. Find what's up at the head of the chain is a start, although if you have a chain that deep and you have multiple seconds within each, you might need to walk through and identify each of the queries in the page chain, find out what was holding them up. Might be additional blocks, or it might be that each of them running a little bit on the slow side. Here's some queries showing a bit of lock weight. Once again, my picture is a little on the blurry side. My expectation is that the perp lock weight, and that tab all the way on the right, by the way, is blockers. So if you have identified lock weight, you can look over at blockers and find out what's doing the blocking. Here's a blurry picture of the blocking and a lock chain. So up at the top of the lock chain, what we're seeing is a dark gray bar. Should have the number of seconds blocked, and the light gray bars are part of the entire lock chain. As you can see down here, there are potentially several levels and lots of things being blocked, and the number of seconds each one is being blocked. We can also look on the right and see the SQL that's being blocked, and we go back and look at the session that was doing the blocking, identify who's doing it, when they were doing it, what they were doing, all the things that were going on within the scope of the session. This is also good for identifying hardware bottlenecks. Now, sometimes these are unexpected. What an unexpected hardware bottleneck? Well, I was at a hospital in Long Beach, California, years ago, and I went in, and the third-party vendor called and said, hey, we have a customer, and they seem to be having problems that nobody else is. They're big. They're our 4th biggest customer, but they have enough hardware to do what they need to do. Can you help them out? So out there, we put the monitoring tool on, and what we found was that we had an excessive amount of network weight that was going on. Well, your query changes are not going to have anything to do with the network weight. You're only returning small quantities of data, which is what was going on. So, of course, I went to the network folks and said, hey, network is slow. And they said, no, it's not. Well, we said, that's what our tools are telling us. These set tools are telling us that nothing is going on. Well, I'll admit that it took me a day and a half to figure it out. It took them a year and a half to figure out that they needed to call me in to figure it out. I don't feel so badly about the day and a half. It turned out they had a bad network card. The network card is returning 98% of their packets, meaning it took 50 times as long to send anything across the network as they needed to, and it was a machine with a single network card and just simply had no other routes to push the information out. Identifying hardware resource bottlenecks can be complicated. There are symptoms that point to bottlenecks. There aren't a lot of ways of proving that you have a hardware problem other than getting new hardware. There are OS-level utilities that will tell you something is going on, but those tend to be snapshots. Those tend not to be correlation tools. With a good weight-type analysis, what you're able to do is correlate CPU to queries, correlate network I/O to queries, correlate, name it, back to the queries. So if you have a 20-minute query and you're doing 3 table joins, updating the 4th table, you're able to identify whether or not there is I/O weight sitting in there, trying to write to log, write to the data, bring the information back that we're trying to update. It provided feedback that the query has started randomly taking upwards of 4 hours. Noticeable pattern to when this is going on. If you can find out when it took 4 hours, you can go and find out what that query was doing at that time, figure out what the wait time is. Maybe it is a bad plan for that particular time, or maybe there's a lot of blocking going on. So may find that, oh, gee, just a lot of I/O, and when we start looking deeply into the I/O, pick a lot of information up. So, wait events now instrumented in ASE 5 and later. Hopefully you're all running 15 or later because 12.5 was in life some time ago. Because they're complex, a purpose-built performance solution using intelligence principles, realistic approach to figuring these things out. Focus on end-user wait time is a key to our app service because that lets us make the user experience faster as opposed to necessarily just making individual queries faster. Really quick, yeah, we got any questions? While waiting for questions to be added, let me once again put the offer out there that if anybody would like to try this tool for free and get free consulting out of it as well, send a note off to Dan or Pete or Amy, and they'll be very happy to get you hooked up. Looking in the chat window, and I'm not seeing any questions at all. Dan, are you there?
I'm here. I'm sorry, I have trouble muting. So if you have a question, feel free to ask it in the question window for the type those in. We do have a couple of questions that have come in. I'm going to ask if we have a white paper on weight events so that we can follow on.
I believe we do have one somewhere, but I'd have to dig it out.
If you'd like to email me, bill.goitein@mlogica.com. Display your screen. I will do. It asks if we have functionality in IQ. At the present time, we don't.
It's amazing when we get that question. You would think they would add it to the list at some point.
They're coming in here. How does table fragmentation affect performance?
Table fragmentation affect performance. Good question. Hopefully you're running reorgs on a periodic basis so that it doesn't become too much of an issue. We're doing index rebuilds or doing whatever's appropriate. But from the short version, table fragmentation mostly affects table scan performance because it's bounce around to find the locations of the page chains as opposed to picking them off the same place in the disk. You also end up with index fragmentation, which causes the same types of issues when you're doing index scans. From that, I mean, back in the early days, the official position of Sybase, in the early days I'm talking 4.4.8, The official position that Sybase took was you don't need to worry about doing things like rebuilding the indexes and the rest of them, but as data quantities increased, official position on that did change. And I don't have the question window on my view. I have a chat window, but not a question window. So if you want to read the questions as they continue to come up, I'll happy to field them.
So that's all as of now. All the questions. Well, then why don't we move on here? If you do a question or think of a question after the fact, you can email me or one at mLogica, and we'll make sure to direct your question to the right place. Sources here you can look on mLogica.com. I encourage you to join our LinkedIn group. What we today was under our Performance Manager products, so you can go to our Performance Manager page for more information on that as well. And so you might have missed it by attending today. You are to 1 week, no cost, based performance health check and architect. We'll be representatives contacting you. Schedule this. My calendars, our next event is March 17th. What's next? Exciting event. Thank you again for attending. Further questions, please contact us.